Hello world, thanks again for tuning in. This is our second installment of our series on managing stress and anxiety in these COVID times. I am very excited to have here Dr. Ben Sanders III. Dr. Ben Sanders is an assistant professor of theology and ethics at Eden Seminary in Webster. He earned a BA in religion with a minor in psychology from Hope College, and he earned his PhD in religious and theological studies with a focus on Christian theology and social ethics. He's also an ordained Baptist minister, and he lives here in St. Louis with his beautiful bride, Liz, and 2 kids in the city. So we're going to go over some questions with Dr. Ben here. So thanks so much for tuning in about how to manage stress and anxiety from a spiritual standpoint. So from the beginning of creation, people have had to deal with stress and anxiety. What do the holy texts say about these subjects?
Yes, this is a great question. I think it's a great place to start, man. Creation is a great place to start. I hope it's okay. Before I start that, I want to just commend you on this work, man. This is sacred work, man, helping us think carefully about stress and anxiety in a moment like this and what it means for us. It's sacred work, and I'm glad to take part in it. Creation is a good place to start. You know, creation is one of those things. If you look across cultural differences, across histories, across religious differences, creation stories or origin stories, these are things that tie us together as human beings, right? We got tons of differences between us, but one of the things that ties us together is this commitment to stories or narratives that help us understand why we are here, right? They help us make sense of this thing we call life in ways that might otherwise leave us feeling like life has no meaning. There's no true value in life, right? So creation stories are central. It's also important to remember that when we read creation stories, whether we're talking about the Christian creation story, which you and I are most familiar with, or creation narratives or origin narratives from other places, what we're reading are human beings trying to make sense of an experience they're already having, right? And I think this is important because when we talk about stress and anxiety, right, when we look at Genesis, for example, the book of Genesis, right, the Christian Bible, right, you can find this really across traditions, but one of the things Genesis does is it tries to help us see that stress and anxiety are going to be parts of life. That no matter how holy you are, no matter how faithful you are, you will encounter stress and you will encounter anxiety, right? Genesis talks about desire in relationships and the pain of childbirth and all of the yearning and the labor that goes into life. Those things are naturally going to induce stress and anxiety. But another thing that the creation stories do is they center us and they allow us to understand that though we will experience stress and anxiety, if we get to a point where we feel like that stress and anxiety is driving us, which usually clinically, that's when stress and anxiety becomes depression, well then we're off track, right? And so these origin stories, I think, help us sort of come to terms with the fact that we live in a life that's going to be driven by this balance between the things that naturally stress us out, naturally increase our anxiety, and our ability to control that and find something like sacred peace, or what we as Christians might call the peace of God inside of that.
That's awesome. That is really very good. I'm excited about it. This is going to be really good. All right. Can you give us some techniques, some practical applications that we can use to handle stress and anxiety that are spiritual based?
Yeah. You were gracious enough to share that question with me before we sat down. And so I was just kind of going back through my life, and I have 5, and I'll be brief. Sure. These are just the sort of 5 things that I use to try to keep myself healthy and something like sane, right? That stress and anxiety presses in on all of us. But I start with prayer and or meditation, right? Okay. Prayer for Christians, it's a way that we talk to God. Lots of religions practice prayer in different forms. But even if you are someone who doesn't adhere to a tradition that believes in a God or believes in deities, the practice of meditation, I think it's closely intertwined with the practice of prayer in as much as you're centering yourself and what you understand to be most true. The thing I appreciate about meditation is it allows me to sit with my breath, to catch up with myself, right? Because even as a Christian, I can't be right with God if I haven't caught up with myself first. That's biblical, right? So I start with prayer and meditation as just centering practices to sort of catch up with me and center myself in who I believe myself to be. The second thing that I've really been working hard to redevelop is a practice of journaling. I find that after I pray or after I meditate, journaling has been a really powerful place to put myself in front of me on the page. This is so important when we're dealing with stress and anxiety because the way stress and anxiety become depression is when we normalize our stressed out, anxious thoughts, right? So journaling for me, I've recently been introduced, for example, to a practice inside of which I will write down my sort of negative, anxious, stressful thoughts. And then I will write down rational responses that help keep that stress and anxiety from becoming so true that I'm sort of driven by it throughout the day. Does that make sense?
Most
Right?
definitely.
So prayer, meditation, and then journaling. Prayer, meditation, journaling, and then the fourth thing that I've discovered is really important for me is exercise. And you know a lot more about this than me, right? You dig into the practice of taking care of your body, right? There's so many things that happen inside of us, just physiologically, biologically, that can naturally increase our stress and anxiety. If you got a lot of things to do, that's already tough enough. If you have a lot of things to do and your body's tight and it's difficult to move, it's difficult to get oxygen in and push it back out, well, that's going to increase that stress and that anxiety, right? So prayer, meditation, journaling, exercise, and then last, checking in with your people, right? And this is in no particular order, right? But these are 5 things that sort of hold me together, right? Like, you and I are friends, right? I mean, we know how important it is to check in with the people that we love and know love us, right? Our immediate family, the folks around us. So those 5 things have been sort of coordinates for me in maintaining my spiritual, my emotional, and my physical health in ways that I think have been helpful.
That's awesome. Those are really good practical applications. If you believe in a God or a deity, how do we contextualize what's going on currently with who God is and what God does? It's kind of a deep question.
That's a deep question, man. I was sitting with that one. I was sitting with that one before we got together, man. And I think whether or not you believe in God, there's something about this moment that we're living in. And I'm thinking specifically about the United States. We could do global, but we'll just sort of keep it local for now, right? The confluence of COVID and all of the stuff we're seeing with racial animosity across the country, no matter how you chop it up, this is a moment in which we are being called to take account of how we spend our lives' energy, whether you believe in God or not. Now, for myself as a Christian and as a human being, I think there's something about this moment that is really clarifying for us that if we don't figure out how to do a better job of taking care of the people in our society who are most vulnerable to lack of health care, lack of shelter, lack of food, lack of basic necessities of life, it is always going to cost us as a whole, right? We have a deep ethical personal responsibility that I think you and I believe in and share a conviction about. But, biblically, God judges the quality of Israel's character, not by how much money they have, how strong their military is, but by how they take care of the poor and the least among them. So I think this is a moment where we are being called as a society, whether we believe in God or not, to get re-centered or perhaps centered for the first time in the work of prioritizing the least so that we can be healthy as a whole.
Wow. That is profound. And lastly, and I wish we could talk about this for hours, and off camera, Ben and I do.
We will.
Lots of time spent. Are there any resources that you can provide to assist with stress and anxiety from a spiritual standpoint?
Yeah, there are tons.
And we can list these things on the site.
There are tons. So I looked at this question and I said, okay, I have to just limit myself to one for the sake of time. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted to share just a short passage from a thinker, a theologian and a mystic named Howard Thurman. Mm-hmm. A lot of folks haven't heard of Howard Thurman, but Howard Thurman was one of the mentors and teachers of Martin Luther King Jr. He spent his life using his radical approach to a Christian-based but really wide-open spirituality to rethink community and to help America imagine its spiritual and social life beyond the limits of racism. Now, I could go on and on about what he did with his life, but I think what I'd like to do as a way of sort of introducing Dr. Thurman and providing just some inspiration, and we can begin providing links later on, is just read this short passage.
Sure.
This is from a collection of essays by Howard Thurman called The Inward Journey. And I just want to read this short passage from page 19 that I've been sitting with for some weeks now. This is from a short reflection called Radical Amazement, but this is what it says. It says, we have externalized our lives to such an extent that more and more, the only real things seem to be what we can touch, see, hear, taste, and smell. As long as we are dealing with objects at the level of the senses, we think we are on ground that is safe and therefore certain. This tendency expresses itself in many ways. We measure our friendship by a wide variety of tokens of testing, by the things we are given, by the repetition of words of affection, by the obvious sacrifices made in our behalf. We often place value upon ourselves in terms of the extent and quality of our wardrobe, or by the size of our bank account, or by the number of prestige-bearing people who know us and recognize us, or by the power we are able to exert over things. Each of us makes his own list. What is forgotten, Thurman says, is the fact that life moves at a deeper level than the objective and the data of our senses. So there's something in here, Heath, that I think in this moment is really for us. Almost all of the things that are driving us, that are stressing us out, are material things, right? And they matter deeply, right? I don't want to in any way make light of COVID. But Thurman is reminding us that even in a world where we are riddled by stressful and anxious thoughts about what might happen to us or our bodies, there is a deeper sense, there's a deeper peace that we can find if we remember that the material world, while vital, is critical, it's crucial. It's one part of what it means to exist. And this is the other part, this connection that we're modeling in this dialogue, right? That you're modeling and reaching out to folks, right? Without that, the material stuff doesn't really matter. So one of the gifts of this moment, right, is to say, wow, we really got to rethink our relationship to the material, and we got to reprioritize our connections to each other. I think that's one of the kind of spiritual resources that I would offer.
Man. Wow, that was amazing, and I am blown away by that. And thank you, Dr. Ben Sanders, for coming in and sharing some gifts here. Dr. Ben, once again, is assistant professor of theology at Eden. If you have the time and energy, please reach out. I can connect you with him. He would love to chat with you and maybe get some more inspiration and resources for you to use. So, part 2 of our series here on managing stress and anxiety is complete, and we'll see you again soon for part 3. Thank you.